Well, hello there. This is Marcy Nettles, your host of the new Your Blank What Now podcast. I'm super excited to be coming to you today for the first episode. This is really going to be a conversation about the birthing process of this podcast. So today I'm actually really blessed to have a co-host that is actually going to be doing the interview process. And it is none other than the most amazing man in the world for me, Dr. Don D. Nettles. Hey, babe, thanks for joining me.
It's my absolute pleasure and honor.
Well, I'm super excited for you to help me paint the picture for everybody that will be listening to this podcast to really understand where it came from, why we're doing it, and the vision and kind of where that vision came from. So can you help me out with that?
Absolutely. So Marcy, let me ask you something.
Uh-oh.
You're a podcast host.
I am.
What now?
I know, right? I never thought that this is something that I would be doing, but thanks to you, here I am. Here I am.
Well, and you've got an amazing story of your own. You've got a very compelling story, and you have just this energy and I don't even know what to call it, superpower about you, that you bring your compassion, you bring your empathetic spirit, and you are able to facilitate people being vulnerable, transparent, and courageous in telling their stories. And you've become a master at that. And I think this is just the next progression of now having your own official podcast platform to do that, to take it to a higher level. And so let's talk about you.
You know, it's interesting because I really think that life is just a bunch of stories strung together.
It absolutely is.
It is. And I've learned, and you know what, now that I'm 50, I'm not afraid to say it, I'm 50. I can look back on life and I can see that I've gained some wisdom through those stories. So yeah, I'd love to talk about them.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about first, let's get into the elements of your story and the kind of the things that maybe formulated your identity. And I don't know how deep you want to go into this, but I think it would be really great to just be vulnerable. You're the host and you're going to be asking people to be vulnerable and tear off some layers that they probably haven't talked about in a while. And some of them are going to be extremely vulnerable and probably even difficult. So let's just get into a little bit of vulnerability with you, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your upbringing, family life. Do you have siblings? If so, what's your birth order? Just let's start there.
It's a great place to start. So I was raised in Southeast Idaho. I am the 8th child in a family of 10 children. My mother had 4 boys right off the bat, and she was really kind of bummed. She wanted a daughter so badly. And so, she got down on her knees and she prayed, and she had a dream. She had a dream where she saw herself encircled by 6 girls. And so she believed that there was 6 daughters that were waiting for her to be their mother. And so she, at the time, was not in a great relationship. My parents did not have a loving relationship. They did not have a partnership in any form of the matter. But my mother wanted those daughters, and she stayed with my dad clear until she had the last one, the 6th daughter, because she had 4 boys in a row, and then she actually had 6 girls right in a row. And it was interesting though, because there's gaps in the time that she had these daughters. She had the first 3 pretty quickly, and then there was a 5-year gap before I was born. And then my sister, just younger than me, was only 18 months later, but then there was another pretty big gap before our youngest sister was brought into this world. And it's my understanding that my mother had several miscarriages along the way before she was able to fulfill that 6 daughters. So, being the 8th of 10 kids really brings a lot of different elements into play. My mother had the biggest heart. She loved kids. She was an amazing mom and caregiver, because she also had a daycare in our home while I was when I was growing up. So we had upwards to 30 other kids in our house at one time, to where she was teaching them how to read before they'd start kindergarten. That I'll be playing in our big backyard, climbing trees with me and jumping on the trampoline, right? So it felt like I had even more siblings than the 9 that I had. And actually, when I was born, my oldest brother had already passed away. He was born with cerebral palsy and he died just before his 6th birthday. And that was several years before I came to be. But, being raised in that type of environment where your father's not present, we didn't see him much when he did come home. He was tired and he would go to the basement and he would fall asleep either on the floor or in a chair and in front of the TV most of the time. And we didn't have much interaction. And growing up, that was hard because I was a little girl that needed her daddy. And he wasn't there for me the way that I really, really needed him to be. And I'm not saying he wasn't a good man. He was a good man. It's just I grew up with daddy issues because of it. But, when we're talking about being in a family that big, sometimes you can feel lost and not seen. And that was a lot of the experience that I had in my youth. I loved sports and I worked hard at it and I was good. So being good at something makes it easy for you to work at it. And because I worked so hard and I was gifted anyway, I shined or I shone or however you want to say it right on the court. And that was good for me because during my games, that's when my dad would really show up, because I was really good and he could say, that's my daughter. And that made me feel good. So I have several different aspects of my growing up years. There was a time period between my 12 and 13 years of age that I actually look at it now and I think of it as a grief cluster. It was a cluster of opportunities for me to learn what it felt like to hurt, to have pain, and to grieve. The only problem, though, was that one of the things that was part of the grief cluster was my parents going through a divorce. And so my mother was very distracted. I don't know if that's the right word because that makes it sound like she wasn't a present mother, but she wasn't fully present for the grief that I was going through in order to be able to help me walk through it. And so a lot of the way and the choices and decisions that I made throughout my teenage years and then into my 20s and even my 30s are based off of not really knowing how to grieve an individual incident and leaving it to kind of fester and develop walls around myself, and I don't want to go too deep into that because there are going to be future episodes where I will share specific parts of my story where I had the opportunity to, really fall into that and stay there or choose to kind of step up and step out and do something different.
Yeah.
So, I'll let you take it from there.
I'm just thinking about your siblings, the number of siblings and your birth order, 4 boys followed by 6 girls. I'm sure that some mathematician can figure out the statistical probability or improbability of that. That's very unusual. And so, wow, that's pretty interesting. But you mentioned, Marcy, that excelling in sports and doing well in sports, and when you had that attention drawn to you, your father would show up. That's not necessarily uncommon in large families because, like you said, sometimes you kind of get lost. Did you feel lost among all the siblings, or how did you take that on?
I certainly felt lost. My father had favorites of the kids. And, and I hope that some of my siblings will listen to this podcast and not take offense because we've had conversations about it. And it's interesting because when you're not the favorite, it definitely impacts you tremendously right then.
Yeah.
But when you are the favorite, it also impacts you, maybe not right at that moment, but as you get older and you have maybe rifts in relationship with siblings because of it, it affects everybody involved, And so I remember specifically when I was younger, there were times when my sister that's just younger than me would ask dad for lunch money and he would tell us no. It's trivial, right? It's lunch money. But then we would send the baby of the family to ask for lunch money, and he would give more than enough for all three of us to her, right? And so we actually started to manipulate that and use, and I actually have to apologize. I'm so sorry, sis. I love you. But yeah, we used that a little bit when we were younger, because that's the way that we could get what we literally needed, right? From our father. It was interesting. It was interesting.
Family dynamics are interesting. And I think the listeners will share this, is that we're a blended family. I have 2 biological children. You have 2 biological children. We're a blended family.
And guess what? Now we're birthing something together. We're birthing this podcast together.
Hers and ours. Your first episode of your first podcast is ours. That's awesome.
Yes, I know.
That's
right?
hilarious. But to that, you mentioned that your mom, with that you kind of didn't know whether distracted was the appropriate word, with the daycare and other siblings in your house, and her ability to recognize when you were going through your grieving process at a young age. And I think now, as parents, we can both look at similar situations and wonder if it's just maybe the difficulty of being able to relate when you have other things in life that are taking your bandwidth and your attention span, and being able to recognize something that may be happening, especially when the child isn't really talking much. And that's now for us, we experience that with our younger kids and our older kids too. Sometimes we don't read minds, but being able to have parental perception on things, I think there is such a thing. But then on other things, depending upon how traumatic or difficult it is to deal with, I think there may be somewhat of a departure. So did you ever have any aha moments when you became a parent yourself, looking back at some of the things that happened in your family? It's like, okay, now I get that.
It's interesting, because it's like I just had an aha moment right now. I mean, I look back and I see everything that my mother did, having 10 kids and the daycare. I mean, she fully supported us. And it was, I'm thinking, it's like, she did all of that with 10 kids, And so me looking back and being a child, I can think, I wasn't really seen, I didn't have necessarily the guidance in certain areas that I could have really used. But look at what she had on her plate. All of the expectations from outside that were on her. And she's a superhero to me. And so it's like, I look at our lives and look at, between us, we only have 4 kids, right? And yet we miss things. We miss things frequently. I mean, being a parent is difficult. I would say it's one of the most difficult things ever to do. That you just do the best you can, the best you know. And, that's kind of, I don't know, I don't want to move ahead of you, but that just kind of brought to mind for me, it's like losing my mom really early. I was really young when my mom died. And I was just on the verge of becoming a mom myself. I was 7 months pregnant. And just so you guys know, stories are important, but the most important stories are the vulnerable ones, the ones that make you cry, the ones that you feel when you're sharing them. And so my mom passed away when I was almost 21, 7 months pregnant. And when I had my son, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do now? I don't know how to do this. And where's my mom? I don't have my mom to help me, right? And so that was a really tough time in my life too. And I know I made a lot of mistakes. Dang it, where's that manual? Where's the help book, right? Yeah. Where's the little chat down in the right-hand corner to ask all the questions of the person that knows it all, right? Why haven't they come up with that yet? I think that would be really helpful. But, I know that, even though you try and you do your best, things are still going to happen. I mean, relationships, you can hope for the best for them and be the best that you can be. And yet the other person may still perceive something differently. And you get to the point where you have to just kind of give it up to God and just let him work his magic, because, oh goodness. Yeah, it's tough.
It is. It is. And then, yeah, that chat box down in the corner would be very helpful. Right.
Like right now.
Yeah. So obviously your mother was very important to you. I hear stories about her constantly, and not just from you and your siblings. When we meet people that knew your mom, nothing but positive comes out of their mouths. And I can imagine what it be. I mean, you called her a superhero. I can imagine what that would have been like, or what it must have been like to be on the verge of motherhood, 7 months pregnant, just almost 21 years old, or whatever exactly how it was, and losing your life mentor. um, could only imagine, but I want to hear it from you. I think that probably played a big role in why you're so bold, why you're so courageous, because you've literally just kind of had to figure stuff out on your own, that your life mentor wasn't necessarily there to lean upon or share ideas with, or, hey mom, what do you do in this situation? So do you think that your mom's passing at such an early age has caused you to just be, I would just call you self-sufficient, and
Or controlling, you're thinking.
no, well, that's part of being
that's a vulnerable
self-sufficient. You
thing
have to
too,
just
right?
do what you have to do. And I think you've, now looking at it on the other side and not knowing you before your mother passed away, I would say that you've done it pretty well. But what's your impression of what kind of impact your mom's death early in your life has made on you?
Well, I think that my mother's impact on me, and in particular her death, I mean, she is me. She did whatever she had to do to get things done. She found a way when it didn't seem like there was one. She always had a smile on her face, even though she should be breaking down. She always turned to God for everything to sustain her. I mean, being on the younger end of things, I didn't see everything that went on between my parents. And she protected us from that. And many people would think that's a really amazing thing to do, to protect your kids from everything that was going on. And, I agree very much, 100%. But I've also come to learn that in her protecting us, she also kept us from learning some lessons. She kept us from learning how to make up after an argument, or how to
Ooh.
ask for forgiveness,
Mhm.
or to receive someone's forgiveness. And I'm not saying that she was an unforgiving person. I'm not saying that at all, because she would forgive before someone would do something to her. That's just the heart she had. It's just the visual and the physical experience that we had was of her protecting us from everything, instead of us learning through the circumstance with her as she was learning. And it took me a long time to really figure that out. Actually, I just figured that out, guys. Life is just a big old opportunity of growth and expansion, because I just figured this out in the past 2 years. And again, I said I'm 50, right? So I went a lot of years not understanding that aspect. So,
There's one thing in knowing you that is somewhat paradoxical for me, or I've had challenges trying to figure it out, or trying to surmise what led up to it. And it's the losing your mom at an early age, having to, out of necessity, be your own superhero and handle everything yourself, figure everything out on your own. People that go through a process like that can tend to be somewhat me-centric. It's all about them. You're so not like that. You're one of the most selfless people that I know. How does somebody go from that kind of a tragic loss of your mother, where you had to literally figure life out on your own as a new mother, all of these new things? How did you become so selfless when it probably statistically is probably not the outcome that people would expect, considering the kind of upbringing you had and the tragic loss of your mom so early?
it's a really deep question. And sitting here, I could tell you, it's like, I don't know, other than I know that this is who God wants me to be. And I think that in the struggles of my life and the opportunities that I've had to go through, and I call struggles opportunities, because we do have that choice. We have the choice to either break down in the moment or to push and break through into our next level and become more and become bigger and to become better and to be able to be a better tool in his hands, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah.
But in all reality, I don't know, maybe it's just always been in me. And sometimes I think I'm a really selfish person though. So for you to say that, it's like, thank you. And I'm glad you see me that way. But you know, I became a police officer at the age of 30. And yes, it was because I wanted to help people, but it was also because I needed the excitement and I needed something to challenge me and to just really kind of keep me motivated. And what better than to taking calls for service to help people. And I was in that field for almost 10 years. I loved it. I loved responding and into some people's darkest days and darkest moments and hoping to bring some light into it. And so, you know, thinking about it, it's like my life has always been that way. I've had really dark holes to where I don't feel like I brought any progress or any good into anybody's life, including my own. But I can look back and I can definitely see the peaks. I can see the tops of the mountains too, to where I've had the opportunity to be able to look back and see how far I've come. So I would say the past 8 to 10 years has really been a growth opportunity for me, and to be able to move into serving others even more and having a bigger heart. You know, I truly believe in the power of stories. I believe that stories told in a vulnerable way can unlock doors. It can release people from jail cells or from a cell, not a literal jail cell, but your own personal cell that you might be stuck in. When you listen to someone share their story of their difficulty and being able to, you know, maybe they even dwelt in it for a while, but then they saw something different. Their mind was opened up, their heart was opened up, and they decided to move forward doing something different than what they had been doing before. Because if they keep doing the same thing that got them what they had, and if they don't want it, why do you keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? I mean, Albert Einstein, you know, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result is insanity. And so I would say that for the first almost 40 years of my life, I was living an insane life. And I was doing a lot of the same things over and over and over again, having the same thoughts specifically about myself over and over and over again that were getting me negative results. They were not getting me the abundance that God has for me. But at the end of that police career, I was in a car accident on duty where I was stopped for an ambulance that was crossing the road, and the lady behind me was distracted and she hit me going about 60 miles an hour. And I ended up with a brain injury and several herniated discs that required spine surgeries and left me unable to be a police officer anymore. And I went through a complete identity stripping. And I kind of lost myself for a little while. I was on a lot of prescription medication to help with the pain. My kids were teenagers at this time and mom was never present for them. Yeah. And I mean, even to this day, I'm learning of things where I, in their minds, failed them. Even though I wasn't aware of what was going on, I didn't even know. And I got to a really, really tough spot to where the combination of losing my career, losing my income, losing my mind, literally, being in a lot of pain, having teenagers that I couldn't help. I was in a marriage that was already struggling. We went through a divorce. We lost a house, and I could probably go on and on and on, but I ended up on more prescription medication that had warning labels on it this time that said may cause suicidal tendencies. And I actually had 4 suicide attempts. It's not because of who I am as a person. It's the totality of the circumstances that I found myself in. And prescription medication, all it is a Band-Aid, guys, and generally it's not a good one. Where it led me was a really dark place. But any time that you find yourself in darkness, just know that the promise is that light is just around the corner. You know, just like in seasons, spring always follows winter. Just like in days, morning always follows night. That if you're in a dark place, there is always hope. There's always a solution. And there's always someone on the path ahead of you that can show you how. And that's why stories are so important, because they can actually be the roadmap for someone that's in absolute despair to be able to walk through their chaos and end up into their ultimate joy.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It was interesting because I didn't really learn that until after that accident, after my suicide attempts, and after I was introduced to something that I never thought I would be involved in, and that's network marketing, guys. A lot of people don't understand what it is. And maybe they're thinking about like the old format of network marketing, because there was a lot of things that were done not real great, and it put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But when I talk about network marketing, I talk about people sharing stories of being in a place where they were desperate. And most of the time they were down on their knees and they were asking God, it's like, you know what? I need help. I need something different. This is what I need. And when the answer came to them, it may not have looked exactly like what they thought it would be, because it was a network marketing opportunity and they probably had the same thoughts that many of you are having right now. But what happened was they had hope for the first time, and they decided to do something different. Because that's the thing, again, if you truly want change in your life, and if you're truly in a bad place right now, you can't be happy just sitting. You've got to be willing to get to your feet and start moving in a different direction to get something different than what you've always got. So I'll always be forever grateful to my dear friends that introduced me to network marketing, and then to the people that very vulnerably started sharing their stories of their breakdown to breakthroughs, that ultimately gave me hope to be able to move forward and to be able to have a new purpose. And I think it was actually my true identity that I always had, that God had given me when I was born, but had never really come to light. So I'll always be forever grateful for that.
Now, you mentioned stories numerous times today. And are you somebody who, have you always been a fan of stories? Do you like listening to stories? Were you the storyteller growing up? Why the fondness of stories?
You know, I think I was always the listener of stories. I was never really the one to tell the stories before. You know, the thing is that I don't really think I became aware of the importance of stories until about 10 years ago. Actually, yeah, 10 and a half years ago. And like I said, with people that were sharing their stories, and then me becoming more bold to share my own story. You know, standing up in front of a room of over 300 people to tell them that you had 4 suicide attempts is not necessarily a walk in the park. The first couple times I did it, I was terrified, because I don't know if you guys know it or not, but sometimes people can suck and they can be really judgmental and they can be not nice. And especially when you're talking about something that most people don't understand and they consider a great weakness. But what I learned is that as I shared my story over and over and over again, I would have people come up to me afterwards. And they would tell me, and I'm thinking of one instance in particular. We were in Michigan at a meeting. And while I'm sharing my story, I see a gentleman in the back with a camera run out of the room. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't say something wrong. And after we got done with the presentation, he came up to me and he had tears in his eyes. And he apologized for running out. But then what he said changed my outlook on stories forever, changed my outlook on being vulnerable and how it makes me feel, to really consider what it means to somebody else when I share my story. Because what he said was, before I came to this meeting tonight, I had planned out my suicide. I was going to kill myself after this meeting. The only reason I'm here is because a friend of mine asked me to come and help. But because you shared your story, I'm not going to do that. You gave me hope. And when you hear that enough times, it's significant in your outlook and what you start to think is important. Judgment from others that don't understand doesn't faze me anymore. It's the hearts and the lives and the generations that you can actually impact by being vulnerable and sharing anyway that matters. And so I have no idea how many times I've shared my story. I have no idea how many times I will have the opportunity to share my story in the future. But what I will tell you is that every single time I have the opportunity, I will share it.
Yeah, it gives people the ability to take their own inventory when they're listening to somebody who has the courage to be vulnerable and to be that transparent, especially the difficult things. We live in a world that is very unreal in many ways, that we have a tendency to compare our blooper reels to other people's highlight reels and feel bad about ourselves as a result of that. And it's a very common thing to do, and it's a very destructive thing to do. And when someone has the courage to show their blooper reels and be real and be vulnerable and transparent, it gives other people permission to do the same thing. And also, you mentioned a jail cell, gives them the key to reach through the bars, put the key in and let themselves out if they're willing to. It's not always easy. In fact, it's rarely easy, but it gets easier as you do it and as you come to grips with the reality of it and the impact of it and the potential of it. So I want to say, I've said brave, or courage, but I think it's also brave, Marcy. I think that you have shown extreme braveness in doing that. And I knew part of your story as we met, but the more I learned about you and how courageous you are and how selfless you are and how truly committed you are to helping other people level up their lives, I fell in love with that before I fell in love with the physical attributes that you have. Later fell in love with those too, but I just think you're an amazing human being, and I'm really blessed to be able to interview you here on this first episode. And I'm absolutely certain that many, 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 many lives are going to be changed from this podcast. I think it was a total godsend.
It absolutely was. We know it was.
Yeah, we know it. We haven't really even talked about how it came to be yet, and we're still kind of talking about you. But I would really like to transition to, how did this podcast come to be? Because it came together very quickly, and it was just almost like it kind of reminded me of an Olympic ping pong match, that it was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, high energy, high action, and a lot of positive emotion. And we were kind of buzzing by the time we kind of looked at each other and said, almost, did that just happen? Yeah. So let's talk about that.
It's really interesting because there's a couple different instances that I can think about on what really led to this podcast. And before we talk about those two, the first one was, you were a pest. You were constantly coming after me and saying, Marcy, you should do a podcast. Marcy, you should be a podcaster. You should really learn how to do this. You should really do it. And I was scared. Just like most people are. I mean, gosh, I'm not the only one that's been scared before, am I? I mean, it was something I had never done before. I had no idea where to even start. I doubted myself in whether or not I could do it and actually do it in a way that it would be good and anybody would even listen. And so I kind of kept pushing back against it. I pushed and I pushed and I pushed.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did. You came to me so many times. But the two things that really came to mind just now about, you guys will come to know really well that I am a believer in my Lord Jesus Christ. I love him, and I know he loves me, and I know he loves every single one of you that's listening. And I believe that an experience that I had this past, gosh, well, really, it's an experience that spans almost 10 years, but the solution came to us in February. I had been suffering from a lot of physical ailments, and we couldn't figure out exactly what it was. We take really good care of ourselves. We supplement, we activate, we exercise, we eat well, we try to get good sleep, all the things that you're supposed to do. But I was still having extreme debilitating back pain, and my memory was starting to fail me. And I was blaming it all on that car accident and the surgeries and the brain injury. But then we came to a point to where it had to be something more, because it was getting worse and it was causing more problems. And so we had all the studies, all the tests done, and it came out that I was perfectly healthy, and I should be completely celebrating that. But it always came back to, then what's going on with me? And we got down on our knees, and we finally went to God, which we should have done much sooner, and said, show us, what is it that's going on? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We'll deal with it, and we'll, whatever, we'll do what we have to do. We just need to know what it is.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is just less than 2 weeks after that, I found myself in a Clubhouse room, which I had only been on Clubhouse for maybe 30 days. I didn't even know how to use it. And I found myself in a room called Breast Implant Illness. And there was women in there sharing their stories in such vulnerable ways. I mean, they're talking about their boobs, right? They're talking about their breast implants. And I sat there and I'm listening to these stories, and I was like, that sounds like me. That sounds like me. And I was like, God, is this it? And so in those stories, I was made aware of what was happening inside of my own body. And now, I mean, that has led me from being in a position to where I felt like I was dying to now I'm in a position that I'm healing and getting better and better every single day. But it was only because those women were vulnerably sharing their stories. And then we had also attended a Tony Robbins event. And if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins event, remember, he's not your guru, but he really kind of is. But he's not your guru, but he totally expands your mind and your thinking process, right? He opens up your heart to new possibilities. And we had gone for a walk after one of the sessions, and God gave me a download. And in that download, do you remember what it was? You were with me.
I do.
Yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think I know what my podcast is going to be. It's Your Blank. What now? And after I kind of explained that to you, we started like coming up with all kinds of a list. I mean, do you remember all the descriptives that we went through and we wrote down? And I actually have a list here that goes on and on and on.
Well, let me share why you have that list.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were actually out on a walk, and with nothing to write on.
No.
And so we started texting ourselves all of the blanks, the things that fill in the blanks of the episodes. And it was just, I think by the time we got back home, we were out for 3 or 4 miles. And by the time we got back home, we had like 40 to 50 different episode titles, or what, potential guest topics. And it was, I just thought it was how rapidly it came together, and how the snowball just kept rolling and kept getting bigger and bigger, and our excitement kept getting bigger and bigger. You actually recorded a video, an audio of yourself of what the intro was going to sound like, all in, like 3 or 4 mile walk. It was just so rapid how it came together.
Yeah, it was amazing. And seriously, I have like 3 pages of a line of the different descriptives that can go into the title, Your Blank, What Now? Because that's what the blank portion is,
right?
It's a descriptive for each one of the interviews that's going to be happening. And it describes how they look at what their difficulty was, so that you can kind of understand what the episode's going to be a little bit about. But just some of the descriptives that we have in here, we've got single, divorced, a felon, addicted, bipolar, diagnosed with cancer, unemployed, a veteran, a college grad, an entrepreneur, an alcoholic. How about you're having hot flashes? What now? Your breasts hurt? What now? You're hating your job? What now? Let's see. There's a lot of good ones on here. There's some that I'm not going to say yet because they're that good. How about you're curious about God? What now? Or you're addicted to porn? What now? So we have a huge long list, and I'm really excited about these first episodes that are going to be coming out right away. And the first one is you're boobless. What now? An amazing, amazing story. You've got to see that episode and hear that episode. And then the next one is you're unworthy. What now? I'm just so excited about what is happening with this because I know that each one of these topics is going to resonate. Maybe not with everyone, even if it just resonates with one. Remember, Jesus left the 99 to go and find the one.
Yes, he did. It's as you're going through the list, and I was actually out of my peripheral vision able to see some of the entries on there. I think the more controversial the topic, the greater liberation is going to come out of the episode. And we're going to, it's your podcast, but I know that you're going to dive deep.
I know you're going to have lots of input though.
Well, I'll be I don't know what consultant.
You'll be in an extremely supportive role, like you always are.
We'll be in the liner notes somewhere. But I know it's just going to be, I have such a good feeling about this because I know it was because it came so rapidly, because it came with such force and momentum. It was authored by God, totally. And just for you listeners, you guys can't see this, but if you see some of the audio files and some of the short video clips, when Marcy talks about this, her entire body just lights up. And she becomes a different person. And I think you are so capable, Marcy. You're so skilled in orating and getting your point across and being able to really empathize with people and relate to people. It's a significant talent that you have. I'm looking forward to where these episodes go and how many people are delivered by them.
Thank you. And one of the things that I want to say about that, though, is it's like, I know that there's people listening right now that have a burning desire on their heart to do something, but they're afraid because they don't know how. And I have to thank you because it's like there for a while, it's like, you were like, I need you to help me do this. I need you to show me how to do this. I need you to do this. I need you, right? Which, yes, I absolutely need you all of the time. But what you did that was very empowering for me is that you started pointing. And by the way, YouTube is an amazing resource on just about everything. If you want to learn how to do something, if you want to start something up, go and Google it or go to YouTube and search it. Because more than likely there is a video out there that will show you exactly how to do it, including how to put together a podcast on GarageBand. Right. So thank you. Thank you for pointing, which ended up empowering me and just giving me even more ownership of this movement, because I believe it's a movement. This is not just a podcast. This is a movement of people becoming empowered to tell their stories in a vulnerable way, being more concerned about the people that are going to be hearing it, that it's going to impact, than the people that it doesn't matter to. So I'm super excited. I'm excited. Are you excited? I'm
very excited for you. Yeah. And I just see nothing but positive coming out of this. I mean, you've already had so many episodes that you've already recorded, and I've been in the background listening to most of the interviews. You're getting so good at interviewing people and helping people truly tell their story. And there's something about a story kind of has a threefold effect. The person telling the story can watch by the people they're telling the story to's response, how it's landing on them, and being able to get a little more animated or change their intonation or become a little more active if people are falling asleep or if they're really starting to get into it. And then the person who's hearing the story, if it's a really compelling story, it's a story that takes them somewhere, it allows them or encourages them to use their imagination. And then there's the people like me on the other side of the closed door listening to the storyteller, listening to the person asking the questions, and listening to the whole thing transpire. The audience, the observers, or the people that are eavesdropping in on that story being told are moved as well. And you've allowed me to do that through the episodes that I've listened to. I can't wait for people to have my experience as they listen to the episode where they're not the person asking the questions, they're not the person answering the questions, they're the person listening to the story and being blessed and liberated by it. That's going to come, and it's going to come big. I'm looking forward to you listeners actually hearing these episodes every week.
Well, that's what I'm praying for. That is absolutely what I'm praying for.
And I will stand in agreement with you on that. It is going to be powerful, Marcy.
Thank you. And thank you for pushing me.
You're not always easy to be pushed. She's not very pushable, guys, but it's the consistency. I knew that if I encouraged you enough and kept on you enough, that you'd eventually give in, see the potential of it. And then that walk that night, God just laid it all in your lap all at once.
You know, and one of the things that I'd like to really put out there to the audience is that this is not my show. This is your show. This is the show that you'll be able to share with other people that you know are going through difficult times, and you just might be the catalyst in them finding a way out. This is the show where even if you think your story's not really significant, but it was significant to you, it's a place where you can have the opportunity to share it, because your story doesn't have to be like my story. Your story doesn't have to be like anybody else's story. Your story is your story, and it's powerful exactly in what it is. But to get it its power, it's just like, a light, a lamp. The only way that the light can be turned on is if it's plugged in. And so the only way that you can give your story the power that it truly has is by sharing it. So just know that this is your show. This is not my show. And I hope that you will take some ownership of it. I hope that you will share it out. I hope that you will plug into it and listen to it every single week, because I'm taking that ownership. And I'm promising you that I will be showing up, and that I will be bringing you interviews that are just going to just have your jaw dropping and maybe your mind's blown a bit. I promise that. But I challenge you to take on your own responsibility with this in sharing the stories.
So last couple of questions for you, Marcy. Up to this point, we're now recording episode 1. You've got many episodes already recorded, you're about ready to release it. What in this journey so far has surprised you about yourself?
So something that I was afraid of is actually quite easy. It's just a matter of doing it. Fear, oh my gosh, fear is so old-fashioned, guys. Like old-fashioned as in caveman old-fashioned, the fear was good for them back then. It helped to protect their lives, right? It kept them away from those wild animals that had those really gnarly teeth coming after them. We don't have that kind of stuff nowadays. And so when we start to fear something, really it's just old programming that's trying to keep us away from doing what we should actually do. And that once you push into it and you actually do it, you're going to find it's easy. It's going to be easy.
So fear is false evidence appearing real. Good call, Marcy. Okay, last question. What are you looking forward to this show becoming?
This show. Exactly what God wants it to be. I want it to be everything that God wants it to be, and nothing more, nothing less. I want it to be a light that people gravitate to because they find hope, because it makes them feel empowered. We're not going to feel sorry for anybody, but we were absolutely going to reach in and reach down and lift up everyone that wants to be. So, the answer to that question is I just want it to be everything that God wants it to be.
Keep doing what you're doing. That's definitely going to be the case, because you are so obedient. You're so welcome, Marcy. So final thoughts.
Final thoughts is I am just super excited to get this thing launched and get it into everybody's fingertips and earbuds. It's the beautiful thing about podcasts, guys. You can listen to these anywhere that you are doing whatever you're doing. It's available, super accessible, and you can find us anywhere. So all you have to do is plug in, guys, listen. And we are super excited. I mean, because this is episode 1. It's all the way up from here. And we hope that you will join us on this journey every step of the way, because it's going to be something pretty awesome.
Can I be a little bold?
Okay.
Can I ask another question?
Okay.
Would you be open to, once you have many episodes under your belt, to have a follow-up interview and just ask some questions on looking back? Is it what you expected? What was surprising to you? What were some of the challenges? And where you've come from then? Because I would love to do that. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, of course. Of course. As a matter of fact, along the way, I plan on having mostly interview-based episodes to where I have a guest with me, but I will also have episodes where I dive deeper into certain aspects of my life and the difficulties that I've faced and what I've learned and how I've moved through them and who I've become because of them. So absolutely, I would.
You're going to peel off some layers of onion, huh?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Might get a little bit stinky up in here, but guys.
Make our eyes water.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Marcy. It's been an absolute honor. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Thank you so much for having the trust and confidence in me and asking me to interview you.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate you interviewing me for this episode 1 of the Your Blank What Now podcast. And I'm super excited that it's, our first together child.
Right.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you.